Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have a great show coming your way on GoJo and Golic. We are here. We are in it. Week 1 in the NFL, baby. We will review, give our notes, talk about everything that went down. So incredible. Plus, Dak Prescott got paid, okay? He just, disrupted the market once again. We have a new record-breaking contract. We'll get into all of that. Plus, a dime and a dream. We have a crazy parlay that cashed that we're going to have to show you. All that and more coming up on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield holding it down in the DraftKings studio in Boston. Great show coming up for everybody. As always, download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings network. Fun one today. Marshall Newhouse going to join us, former NFL veteran offensive tackle, one of the voices you are going to see and hear on the pregame power-up coming up tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern, ahead of Monday Night Football as we get Jets-Niners to finish off the weekend. But, Dad, finishing off Sunday, good Lord, you were there for an absolute banger in Detroit. We got plenty of news and notes on all the rest of the NFL teams, like Jesse said, but, man, starting anywhere but overtime on Sunday Night Football to begin the season in the second of 2 playoff rematches from last year as the Lions outlast the Rams in overtime in a game where, man, if you're the Rams, just trying to figure out who you have healthy and available to you after this one seems like a chore. What was it like in the building there, Dad?
I mean, it was electric. The fans were, going nuts before the game because there's hope and expectation in Detroit, right? It's not hope for a winning season or a 500 season, God forbid the playoffs, let alone the NFC Championship game. And then they got that. So the expectations are high. The expectations are you get at least to where you were last year or more. So it's completely changed in Detroit. And that's thanks to Dan Campbell, no doubt about it. But these two had a wild card game last year, 24-23, a 1-point game. Both quarterbacks played incredibly well in that game. And this one started to look like the runaway. This one was 17-3. in the third quarter when Detroit got the first score in the third quarter, a touchdown, and it was 17-3. You mentioned, and I'll get into it, LA had all kinds of injuries coming into the game and then during the game, yet they held Detroit to just 9 plays in the third quarter while the Ram offense took over and actually took the lead 20-17 with 4 minutes to go in the game. I mean, the crowd was going nuts when they were up 17-3, and you could hear a pin drop when all of a sudden it was 20-17. Because what the Rams went through, there was one play in the second quarter when they went for it on 4th and about 3 or 4 in Detroit in the red zone. And already the Rams started the game without their 2 tackles. Rob Havenstein was out. Alaric Jackson Havenstein had an ankle injury. Alaric Jackson, a 2-game suspension for the personal conduct policy. So you already had backup tackles in the game. You had Warren McClendon and Joe Noteboom. Noteboom has gotten time in the past. So on this one play in the second quarter, on 4th down, not only do the Rams not make it, they turn the ball over on downs. They were awful, especially early on in the red zone. Not only do they turn it over on downs, Matthew Stafford gets tabletopped and hurts his ankle. Puka Nacua hurt his knee on the play and was done for the game. And Joe Noteboom had to get carted to the training room on that play. They got 3 guys hurt, 2 done for the game. And to top it off, Mike, this is to your old line, Steve Avila, who started at guard, he hurt his knee. So Bo Limmer, a rookie, had to come in. And when Noteboom went down, A.J. Akure had to come in. A.J. Akure played at Michigan State, actually played against Aiden Hutchinson at Michigan, and Aiden Hutchinson was just wearing him out on pass rushing. But the O-line actually stabilized, and the Rams had a pretty good second half in getting the lead. I mean, now Stafford had pressure on him all night. He was throwing off his back foot.
Yeah.
He was laying some lollipops out there. But for 2 backups, actually 3 backups and a line switch, Jonah Jackson was playing center. He went to guard when Bo Limmer came in to go to center. This line was held together by chicken wire and duct tape. Yet somehow they got the lead, somehow being Cooper Kupp on 21 targets and 14 receptions.
Yeah, the somehow was Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, and Cooper Kupp. That was the somehow, because there were a couple of reps early on when that group started to get into the game where Stafford was under siege every play, where it was a fire drill and Aiden Hutchinson was in the backfield before anything could happen. And then after that, Sean McVay said, all right, we're going to max protect. We're going to motion once before the play. Chris Collinsworth went over this a lot on the broadcast booth there, where, hey, I'm going to motion once before the play to give my quarterback a man or zone tell, and then you're going to make the quickest decision humanly possible, and that's usually going to go to 10. And, Dad, what Matthew Stafford was able to do in those circumstances is a reminder of why we had the awkward situation we had last night, where you've always got Matthew Stafford coming back to Detroit, the Lions and him and Jared Goff forever intertwined because of that trade where the Rams said, Jared Goff, you're not good enough for us. And the Lions had years of Matthew Stafford before he was pulled from there to win his Super Bowl. It's always going to be awkward because at the end of the day, when Matthew Stafford was under duress, he could do that. And when Jared Goff is under duress, there's very little he can do. And that's the complicating factor for most of the quarterback discussion we have in the NFL, is not what you can do when you've got the full complement of weapons. And this comes up for Tua in Miami. This certainly comes up for Brock Purdy in San Francisco. But it's when the house is burning down around you, what can you do to elevate everybody else? And Matthew Stafford reminds you, even for the second oldest starting quarterback this year in the league, behind only Aaron Rodgers, that when that guy is on his best, under duress in the pocket, he can deliver throws that 99% of the quarterbacking population just cannot. His better is truly still better.
Yeah, I mean, he was throwing the ball like Kurt Warner threw the ball, off his back foot going backward. And Kurt had an incredible completion percentage. And now Stafford did lay up an interception in the end zone when he couldn't get a lot of zip on the ball. but he was under duress. It blows my mind, and I was saying it on air, how because Puka was out, the ball's going to Cooper Kupp. He's in motion every single play. To have a step counter on him and the amount of steps he takes in a game would be ridiculous because he's in motion every play, and he's running an out route, he's running a hook in the middle of the field, or he's running a slant, and they had to get the ball to him quick because the pressure was on Stafford, so he had to get the ball out. They were mostly short passes. But it's amazing. It was like Cooper Kupp in 21 when he had 145 receptions, and you just scratch your head saying, how in the hell is he open every single time when the ball's coming to him? It's absolutely incredible, and that's exactly what got him back in the game.
And this was without the benefit of really any sustained rushing attack last night. Overall, just 83 yards, 3.6 per carry. Kyren Williams, who was a revelation last year, they could get nothing going with that interchanging offensive line in front of them. And so this was completely on the shoulders of the quarterback play caller and your best star wide receiver, who, listen, got some health. Tyler Johnson had that big long catch. Colby Parks, DeMarcus Robinson. You had some guys they would sprinkle in like a garnish every once in a while, but it was a big heaping helping of Cooper Kupp in the middle of that plate.
Yeah, it was. And then on the other side for Detroit, they were an O-lineman's dream. Run the ball, play smash mouth football, veteran O-line with Decker, Glasgow, Ragnow, Zeitler, who they got from Baltimore, and Penei Sewell. Those guys just steaming straight ahead. The running game was working early. Give the Rams credit. They were stopping it in the third quarter where, again, Detroit had 9 plays in the third quarter, the entire third quarter, as opposed to their overtime drive, which was 8 plays alone. The overtime drive of 8 plays, 7 runs, 5 of them to David Montgomery, basically straight up the gut. I mean, it was a boring but effective, for the high-flying NFL and offenses. It was just smash-mouth football. And as a former O-lineman, you'd rather go straight ahead than drop back in pass protection and go backward. And that's what they were doing. And they just wore the Rams down in overtime.
Well, Dad, I want to certainly shout out 2 groups, and then I want to ask you a question. One is, you're right, that Lions offensive line where Kevin Zeitler, he's getting up there in age, replacing Jonah Jackson in a group that's considered one of the best in the NFL. And the Rams defense gave them hell for a lot of that game. This incredibly young Rams front, led by the rookies out of Florida State and Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, right. Kobe Turner, who was the star for them last year up front, a linebacker group that lost Ernest Jones before the season, getting traded there, led by Troy Reeder, Christian Roseboom. These guys stepped up and made more plays than I think a lot of people would have expected for a group that young, losing arguably the best defensive player of all time in Aaron Donald on that side of the football. Held their own for a lion's share of that game, pun fully intended. But that was an attitude drive. That was a Lions culture drive in overtime of, hey, we're just going to move a man from point A to point B against his will that whole time. Montgomery's our bad airing ram with Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield, and we're going to blunt force trauma you into the end zone after a long game and everyone's exhausted in week 1. So that is, to me, Dad, the reminder of what the Lions have built. The foundation of that team exists right there. It's not in Jared Goff going toe-to-toe with another quarterback in some shootout. Jared Goff is a very capable quarterback in certain situations, throwing play action over the middle. But when you get his feet off the mark, it's not going to be as pretty. So the only question I wanted to ask you, Dad, game-wise for Dan Campbell and the Lions, who get out of this with a win, who have all that expectation, late in that game, fourth quarter, they're down in the fourth quarter. They punt it to Matthew Stafford with a couple of minutes left there with no guarantee that they're going to get the ball in return. Were you surprised that Dan Campbell, one of the most aggressive fourth down decision callers in the NFL, chose to punt it down and put it in the hands of his defense?
Yeah, because normally he's just playing for 4 downs. So third down isn't a normal third down, and we're going to punt play because he's planning for 4th down. He just had trust in his defense, and obviously it paid off. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised that he did that for a guy that is just an absolute gambler to a fault almost. It was surprising, but it paid off. Even like last year when they lost, when they went for it all the time in the NFC Championship game, he did not apologize for it. He said, that's who we are. So it was a little bit surprising. And also for Detroit, you know, you look at the offense, you rely on Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. St. Brown had, 3 catches in this game. Laporta had, he had 4. It was Jamison Williams. They talked about Jamison Williams having a breaking out. The speedster hitting on crossing routes, yards after the catch, had a 52-yard touchdown reception as well, had over 121 yards receiving on 5 catches. He's the guy. I mean, he's the guy they like to get the ball to in space. They run a jet sweep with him one time as well. He gains 13 yards. So he's kind of that home run hitting guy that they were looking for when they drafted him.
Yeah, he's the one they need. And if you're going to be encouraged by anything as a Lions fan other than your ability to just outlast in this game, certainly Aiden Hutchinson looked the part. Some of your young players on defense, Terry and Arnold, struggled, penalties late in that game that affected it. But if you're looking for the thing to be really encouraged by that's different and new for you in Detroit this year, it's Jamison Williams finally coming on. Obviously, the injury his rookie year, then dealing with the gambling suspension. There's been all these disruptions in his career. If you get him going, that's an element of this team that they just have not had offensively and would probably take them to the next level, I think, in most people's minds. So we finished that one with the Lions, bona fide competitors, Super Bowl competitors, all those things. The Rams on the other side picking up the pieces. It's just going to be a matter of who's available to them, because that felt more like the 2022 Rams that went through the meat grinder with their offensive line than it did the 2023 Rams, full of excitement with Kyron Williams coming on, Puka Nacua, all that.
Talk about the toughness of players, especially offensive linemen. So again, you're right. It's Puka. How is his knee? Note boom, because he's going to have to play another game if he can, because Jackson's suspended for 2 games. Havenstein, we don't know when he's coming. Really well, the guard. We were given a note by their PR people that he was out of the game, because of the knee. But after they came back from break, he was on the field in the huddle, ready to go, and they pulled him off the field. They put in Bo Limmer, and they pulled Avila off the field. And not only did he not sit down, he started working on pass pro with one of his teammates on the sideline. And finally, a coach had to go over and basically say, dude, you're done. You're not going back out on the field. This guy was just trying to get back out on the field, was doing everything he could, and finally he ended up just sitting alone on the bench, all the tape off, like he was totally dejected that he couldn't get himself back in the game.
It's just a grid off in Detroit last night is what it sounded like. Everyone decided to go full Motor City and make sure that they were going to be out there. And I get that from Steve's perspective. He was a guy that, remember, going into camp was supposed to be moving to center this season and be that role for this Los Angeles Rams team, as they had kind of tinkered some things around. And, man, from the start of training camp till now, Dad, for the Rams, it really has been nothing but one negative headline after another in terms of the health of this team overall. Again, I would say the thing you could feel most heartened by was, at least defensively, that A, you got out of this game relatively healthy, and B, you went up with one of the best you had him ranked as your best offense in the league, Dad, and it took the Lions until overtime to break through and score more than 20 points on this Rams defense that's, again, replacing the gravity of Aaron Donald, which certainly from a pass rush perspective, from a run perspective, and just the way opposing teams have to approach you, he's where everyone started. Every defensive coordinator worked their salt when they went up against the Los Angeles Rams, started by saying, what are we going to do with 99? On every play, we've got to have him accounted for in a plan. They don't have that anymore. Ernest Jones, who got traded, was their green dot player on defense. He's the communicator on the field that has the radio in his headset with the coaches. And now he's gone for Troy Reader, that I know the fan base has a bit of a tortured relationship with, but goes out there and now he's in that role. New guys in the secondary, on and on down the list. And I thought that group showed up, played fast and aggressive. It was what you heard out of training camp. And Dad, they're going to have to continue to mature quickly, because on offense on the other side, while I think Rob Havenstein is supposed to get back soon, obviously on the other side, Alaric Jackson's a suspension, so he'll come back from that. That's not a health issue for him, but you're still dealing with that shuffling internally, especially if this was Steve Avila turns out to be anything serious.
Right. And then obviously with Puka and his knee. Now, Tyler Johnson stepped up in Puka's absence and did a nice job. Averaged like over 15 yards a catch. He did well. He stepped up, but it was obviously the Cooper Kupp show. Again, we're going. I mean, it's like Stafford can go to the line and yell to the defense, "I'm throwing the ball to Cooper Kupp, and you can't stop us." And that's exactly what they do.
It's why all these young quarterbacks coming out. We've heard it from C.J. Stroud when he did the press tour this year. We heard it from Caleb Williams when he got asked about his favorite quarterbacks. All these dudes rep Stafford because he can do the things that are outside of the frame of normal players. Between the arm strength, it's what you brought him over to Los Angeles to do. In that case, it's go 5 wide and do all that. But Dad, in this case, it's also when someone's in your lap to be able to throw that no-look, isolated arm kind of action and fit it through a keyhole to the guy everyone knows is going to get the ball.
Yep. But Detroit ends up with the overtime win, playing smash mouth football with all the specialist talent they have around them. It was just grinding the ball between the tackles. Again, an O-lineman's dream, and it turned out to be a pretty good dream for Detroit as they go 1-0.
Back to GoJo and Golic, Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. Guys, Dak Prescott and the Cowboys agreed to terms on a 4-year, $240 million contract extension ahead of Sunday's victory against the Browns. Now, the deal includes $231 million guaranteed and an $80 million signing bonus. So a lot of cash. At $60 million per year in new money, he's going to be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. And you guys, Dak himself said he didn't see this coming. He thought he was going into the game, into the season without a deal. Are we shocked that this happened right before kickoff, or is this just Jerry Jones being the drama?
Yeah, I guess we can't act shocked at this point because as we've talked about over and over during this entire saga, this is what the Cowboys do. But Dad, for even Dak to be surprised, and a guy who seemed prepared to go into this season betting on himself, it had to be a sigh of relief. I get that he felt ready to go and try and challenge and potentially hit the open market. And we know he probably could have gotten even more than this, but the fact that the Cowboys knew, hey, in order to keep Dak, who's got all that leverage at this point, we're going to have to swing this big. He lands a deal that finally is the first quarterback to crack $60 million a year, which we figured here or somewhere else he was going to be. But to now get that $231 million guaranteed, and for people going, man, that's kind of a weird number, not an accident. Deshaun Watson, who had the $230 million fully guaranteed contract, the most guaranteed money given to a quarterback, he now eclipses that, oddly enough, in a game where he went against Deshaun Watson that we'll get to here in a few. But, Dad, richly deserved. I'm not surprised Dak signed it because at the end of the day, if you're going to get close to that kind of money, if you like where you're at, and just that human nature of understanding the risk that this game in particular poses when you step out of the field, I can't fault Dak for not doing what we all wanted and going to see, hey, what a quarterback of that caliber gets on the open market in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, $80 million signing bonus. $80 million. I got my last year in the league when I signed with the Dolphins, I got a $50,000 signing bonus and thought I was rich as hell. I mean, $80 million is just stunning. And Jesse, going to answer your question, this is Jerry Jones. And because Micah Parsons is up next, and, you know, the thought, would you get a deal done? They'll get it done next offseason. He'd be on his 5th-year option, and then they could have 2 years of franchise. But that's not going to get that. He's going to be the highest-paid defensive player. I think the players understand Jerry, and even Dak, who did an interview with Troy Aikman, had said, yeah, sometimes Jerry says things that anger me, that tick me off. But I think players all understand that's just Jerry. He does his business differently. Now, they haven't won a Super Bowl since '96, so, you know, they're still searching for that. But the guys do end up getting paid. CeeDee Lamb's the second highest paid receiver. Dak's the highest paid quarterback. Micah Parsons, if he has any kind of year that we expect him to have, is going to be the highest paid defensive player. It just takes a while for Jerry to see the leaves fall and everything to fall into place. But basically, the players know they're going to get their money.
Well, the leaves fall. It took a while for him to admit to himself he had no leverage in this situation, that he created that situation. That's ultimately what it comes down to is Jerry goes and tries to do all this blustering in the media to see if he can create leverage where there is none. And when you've got a quarterback that you, Jerry Jones, gave a no-trade clause to, and you, Jerry Jones, decided to wait and get this deep into the quarterback market, then you now stare at the potential oblivion that was, again, next year, watching Dak Prescott not only play for somebody else for the contract he was going to have richly deserved, but also have him still count $40 million against the books for you because of the lack of financial wherewithal you had in the lead up to this. So no one created more problems for Jerry Jones in this situation than Jerry Jones. And at the end, he finally realized, hey, I can't do any more than that. And walking into a world where for Cowboys fans who are all going to say, well, Dak still hasn't done it in the playoffs in the way that we need to. Well, Dak's not Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson as a quarterback. No, he's not. I think at this point, Dad, we've got a pretty honest thought process of where Dak is. Probably on his best day, if you're truly evaluating quarterbacks, anywhere from 7 to 12 in terms of the best quarterback in the league. He was an MVP runner-up last year. He put up great numbers last year, but in terms of that actual ability, probably falls in that range, which we know is enough to get you paid and is also enough to not want to wander around in the desert looking for your next quarterback at this point in your team's life cycle. If you're Jerry Jones and going out onto the field yesterday, Dad, I think you saw that play out where the numbers weren't otherworldly for Dak Prescott.
No.
19 of 32 for 179 yards and a touchdown in a game where, hey, they're breaking in two rookies on the offensive line that they've got to account for there, and they let the weapon that is the defense go to work in this game. And so, Dad, ultimately the right decision by the Cowboys. Understand this is what you got to do to retain quarterbacks of this caliber in the NFL. And I do believe Dak is one of those guys that falls into the range of being worth keeping around. It would have just been smarter to do it earlier so you weren't spending this much money on it. But again, that's a Jerry problem. That's not a Dak problem.
Yeah. Without question, it's a Jerry problem. And yeah, the offense, they had 265 total yards. Now, it's against, we talked about this matchup and the Browns, how good the Browns defense should be. So they didn't expect a lot of yards, but they end up getting a lot of points. You get a couple of turnovers by Deshaun Watson, who we'll get into. But CeeDee Lamb, who signed his deal, he played over 70% of the snaps. And again, you mentioned Dak's numbers weren't great. And I would agree, 7 to 12 area, maybe at times a little bit better than that. But this is a team that will be led by their defense and Dak Prescott to CeeDee Lamb, because we know there's not much of a running game, even though Zeke did get a rushing touchdown. They just put it on Cleveland, who's got their own problems.
They do. Cleveland has a lot of problems, and we mentioned that, hey, $231 million that the Dallas Cowboys spent on Dak Prescott through one game can already feel better about that than the $230 million that the Browns spent on the other side, Dad. An abysmal outing for Deshaun Watson, who coming into this game, I saw Mary Kay Cabot over at Cleveland.com reported that Deshaun Watson on Friday lost his father, Don Richardson, who he had been raised by his mother. So the relationship there a little bit different, but still his father passing away. On Saturday, his former Clemson teammate, DeAndre Overton, tragically killed by gun violence, I believe, at a party in North Carolina. So dealing with some of that with the shoulder injury coming off the offseason. But, Dad, it just has never looked anywhere close to what the Browns have paid for on that team. And that's another group where both their starting tackles were not available in this game. Right. You had both backups in from last season, and it looked like a group that did not have an identity. They tried almost everything. Ben Solak over at ESPN pointed out Deshaun Watson in the first half was 0 for 7 on throws more than 5 yards down the field, 0 for 4 when pressured, and 0 for 4 against the blitz. So when the going got tough, the Browns and Deshaun Watson had no answer, Dad, and this Browns defense is in for a long year, something I know is infinitely familiar to you in the Eagles days that you had.
Yeah, again, first half, the Browns had 54 yards and 1 first down. Deshaun Watson overall was 2 of 11 on passes, 10 yards or more air yards. They got taken out of their game plan, right? I mean, they're down, 27-3, and they just started rolling on them. So you got to pass the ball. He ends up throwing the ball 45 times. Deshaun Watson is just not the Deshaun Watson they got from Houston. He's just not. And to hope he's going to be, I think, is fool's gold. So you have to try and make it on a shorter passing game and a rushing attack where you don't have Nick Chubb yet. You have Jerome Ford at 12 carries for 44 yards. Again, they couldn't run the ball. They ran the ball, 16 times because they had to get taken out of their game plan. And one of their top receivers, David Njoku, has a high ankle sprain. And who knows how much time he's going to be lost for. So they're in a tough position on offense. All the pressure is going to be on that defense, and Dallas just ran it up on them.
At some point, if it continues to stay like this, and I saw Dan Orlovsky tweet about this, you're going to have to ask the Jameis Winston question of, is it worth potentially trying for anyone else? Because if it's injury, if it's just performance, if Deshaun Watson's never going to get back to the player he was before all of the scandal and sexual assault allegations and the money that you paid him there, then you owe it to the rest of that team to explore every option at that position, because right now it's a non-compete.
Oh, without question. Oh, I definitely think I don't think Deshaun Watson's coming back to anywhere near what he was in Houston. And you're right. I mean, it's about wins and losses. It's about the guys in that locker room and what you owe to them. You don't play somebody, in this situation because you're paying them all that money. You got to get wins, and you have to you can't have turnovers. Either way, he had 2 turnovers. So he'll get time. He'll certainly get more time because, again, the tackles were out. Now, Njoku's going to be out. He got hurt, I think, in the third quarter. So he is dealing with a little less from an injury standpoint.
Certainly, and we know, too, with the Cowboys defense, my God, Micah Parsons in that group looked insane. Yep. That shot of Damarian Overshawn, their linebacker, that looked like he might have been injured during training camp and they were wondering about going into the season, shot out of a cannon tracking down Deshaun Watson. So pretty incredible to see there from their star player there. Besides that, big news yesterday. Cowboys quarterback signing a long-term deal. Jesse, we also had big news before the Dolphins even kicked off yesterday in that game in terms of weird stuff there. What the hell happened with Tyreek Hill?
Yeah, he was detained by police on his way to the stadium. Pretty shocking footage, too, shows him on the ground, surrounded by officers, being cuffed. What did you think when you saw this break and heard about it, guys? It's since come out that one of the officers involved in the arrest has been placed on leave. They're conducting an investigation. I think a couple of Tyreek's teammates also stopped to try and de-escalate. One of them was detained. So it seems like, a little excessive use of force here, perhaps?
I mean, it's odd that we can call this a Scotty Scheffler because, Dad, it seems eerily similar to what we saw leading up to that tournament at Valhalla in Kentucky where, Jesse mentioned Calais Campbell and Jonnu Smith both went out to the scene to try and help de-escalate the situation a little bit, and Calais Campbell ended up getting detained. Mike McDaniel said all these guys were a little shook up when they got there in these circumstances. And Tyreek Hill said, I did what my uncle always told me to do, keep my hands on the wheel and answer the questions. I didn't use profanity or anything like that. I'm sure we'll get more information about this.
Yeah,
but Dad, to Jesse's point, the fact that as the Miami Police Department gets ready to do an internal investigation here, they've already put that officer on leave, might indicate that we're dealing with another situation where it was a little bit too much and a little too overzealous.
Yeah, we can only compare it to the Scotty Scheffler situation so much because Scotty Scheffler didn't end up on his stomach getting cuffed. And, we don't know. We heard there was a verbal altercation, but as Tyreek Hill said, I didn't cuss at anybody. So you don't know what the conversation was. But for him to end up on his stomach with 4 cops around him getting cuffed, and it was wild because it was a block from the stadium. You actually saw fans walking by on the sidewalk, kind of looking, going, oh boy, and then oh my God, that's Tyreek Hill. I mean, that is so bizarre, this situation, that you're right. More is going to come out, and one officer already being put on administrative leave, I don't think bodes well for the police here.
And let's be very clear, guys, because again, Tyreek Hill said he was nothing but respectful, answering questions, etc. But let's be clear, it's not a crime to be disrespectful to a police officer. I'm not saying that's what Tyreek Hill did, but I'm just saying that's not a crime. So,
no, it's certainly not grounds for any sort of mistreatment or anything like that.
Yeah.
But all of it, and Tyreek Hill said, what if I hadn't been Tyreek Hill? Where in this situation, it's not like you're asking him for it to be treated differently, but at the same time, the fact that they didn't recognize Tyreek Hill on the way to a professional football game, where, oh, by the way, much like what we talked about, Scotty Scheffler ended up finishing, 6th in that tournament, despite starting that morning in a jail cell. Tyreek Hill did not go that far where he got to jail or anything like that, but finished with a team leading 130 yards receiving, including an 80-yard touchdown in a game that Miami had to dig themselves out of a hole of. So pretty impressive performance considering the way that his morning started, in a way that, listen, if I see red and blue in the back of my windshield and I've done nothing wrong at all, your heart rate goes up. So I can't imagine how jarring this was for him, Dad.
And he did did you guys see he did the celebration? He did the cuffed celebration. That was pretty, I was you silly.
Yeah, Jalen Waddle come up and act like he was escorting him away.
Yeah.
Listen, were the body cams on the officers? Will we see that footage? Will we hear the conversation? All that. Drew Rosenhaus, Tyreek Hill's agent, just was so upset, saying it was just way overboard. So we'll get more information coming out on this.
By the way, was Drew Rosenhaus out at the crash there? Did I see that? There are some agents that are in it with you, but Drew Rosenhaus showing up on the scene as you're getting cuffed, that man has earned that money over the years. Coming up next, we'll talk about some other players that earned their keep this weekend. Next on GoJo and Golic. All right, we're about 20 minutes before Marshall Newhouse, former decade-long NFL offensive tackle, comes and joins us to break down the rest of the weekend. We'll get into some of the biggest surprises that we saw, too. But, Dad, Brady made his booth debut this weekend. You were busy calling Sunday Night Football, but Tom Brady made his Fox debut for that Cowboys and Browns game that we already talked about where, Deshaun Watson goes out there and lays an egg. That Browns offense stuck in mud. You get Dak Prescott fresh off a new deal. It has got all the storylines you could want for someone calling a game, and a very mixed bag of reviews for TB12 in the booth there.
Oh,
Dad,
really?
I'm curious, when you started calling games in the booth, it was, listen, from listening myself, I know you didn't really get a chance to listen to it because you were getting ready to work.
No.
It sounded like a guy who was doing this for the first time in a big-time stage. He was uncomfortable with the ins and outs, trying to make tight points in the booth. He sounded a little bit awkward at times, and people picked up on it, which is going to happen. When you know he's going to be paid this amount of money, when you're replacing Greg Olsen, a guy who everyone likes and thought did a great job at this, and you're coming in the way that he is, I'm not surprised that it was a little bit clunky out the gate, but to me, and that's why I'm curious about your experience when you first started in the booth, the things that were most difficult for you, because this to me seems a lot more par for the course of stuff you'd be bad at early on when you're not allowed to make your debut as part of a three-man booth. You're not calling preseason games first. You're not calling games in the USFL or anything like that. This is your first real look at it outside of the, I'm sure many dress rehearsals that he's done, and it sounded like a first time.
Yeah, mine was an evolution. When I first started this in the mid 90s, there wasn't as much hurry up offense or standing at the line and doing plays at the line. There was more huddle, so I actually had more time to talk. And then that evolved to now where, last night the Rams are on the line of scrimmage. Ryan Radke, my play-by-play guy, he's got to get the play up. He's got to set everything up, so I'm talking less. That's probably the most difficult thing is the timing, trying to not just have play-by-play talk, analyst talk, trying to have an actual conversation between the two of you. And then what points you want to make. It's like doing a studio show where you have the single camera, 45 seconds to make your point, and you may have 5 good points, but you can only make 2 or maybe 3 of them in your time slot. Well, speed that up on the amount of time you have to break down a play to whether you want to break down the play, talk about a bigger picture of the points you want to make, picking out the points that you think are the most valid, making those points and still giving it back to your play-by-play in time to set up the play. And again, as you said, they've done practice. It's not like he just walked into the booth for the first time, but it's the first time when it was for real. And there's going to be a learning process. There's going to be a timing process. Just like he didn't start out as the GOAT quarterback. There were some bumps along the road.
100%. And I think it's one of those things, if you're Fox, you had to kind of know this was going to come. And sacrificing a little bit of discomfort in the immediacy to get a guy that you think has the ability, will work hard enough at this, and then has the greatest resume in the history of professional football to then delve into, feels like it's worth that risk early on, Jesse, of then getting that reward later.
Definitely. I do think it's kind of funny because he just came out and said all that stuff about how he thinks it's detrimental for rookies to come out and have to start for their team and stuff. And I'm like, that is my brother in Christ. That is exactly what you are now doing in the Fox booth. Probably would have been better if you'd started a little bit lower, less high stakes, and worked your way up to being in the #1 booth. But here we are, buddy. So let's see how it goes for you.
You know what?
That's
Life is
point.
full of do as I says and not as I do's. And so when someone's going to pay you $375 million over 10, you do the dues so that the direct deposit hits, even for a guy who, and Tom Brady doesn't need it. There's got to be part of him that's just doing this because, hey, he's a hyper competitor. We get Brady versus Belichick in the media now, by the way, which I know Bill Belichick, there was all those headlines Shefty was tweeting out that he still wants to get back into coaching in 2025. I don't think he's ready to settle in long-term the way that Tom is right now. Although with Tom, you've got the ownership stake that's about to go through with the Las Vegas Raiders that could complicate things a little bit. People are always, the Stugatzes of the world going to believe that he's one snap away from wanting to come back and play. But at least right now, we get a little bit of that in the media, which warms my heart.
Yeah, and you're right with the Belichick, and Belichick gets more chances to do things. He has more opportunities to break down film or talk on podcasts, or thing where Tom is just doing one game a week. And everybody loves hearing Bill and Nick Saban break down tape. I think that's what everybody wants to. They're just glued. It's like you just stop and you watch when Bill or Saban break tape down.
Bill was also playing chess, not checkers, because the bar is on the floor for him. If he shows like a little bit of personality, everyone's like, look at us, true. My God. Yeah.
It is so impossibly true. So, again, I think it's going to get better before it gets worse in the booth for Tom Brady. Yeah. I think he's got all the makings there of it. But it gave plenty of people a chance that they have all been looking for, which is an opportunity to dunk on Tom Brady for being bad at something that people haven't had for quite some time. That might have been a surprise to some. Jesse, let's get to the other surprises that we had from the NFL this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we've made a ton of predictions, obviously, on this show about how we think the season's going to go. So what do you think the biggest surprises of the weekend were? I don't think anybody had the Patriots beating the Bengals on their bingo card. I certainly didn't.
No, that was the biggest surprise to me. That was the biggest spread of the weekend. I don't know what the line ended up at. I think it was 8.5, but it was the biggest line of the weekend. And it's just more for Cincinnati. I mean, Cincinnati ended up in the bottom, close to the bottom against the run last year, and they gave up 170 yards rushing to the Patriots. It was Ramondre Stevenson had 120 of those yards on 25 carries. They controlled the ball for 34 minutes. So for Cincinnati, where we know we can talk about the supposed offensive firepower, which was non-existent, no T. Higgins this game. You do have Jamar Chase, who had 6 catches for 62 yards, but they barely play anybody in the preseason. They are kind of notoriously slow starters. So I think they'll get it together. But as I mentioned, I wasn't so much worried about the offense, even though they barely put up any points. I worried about the defense, and the defense still getting run on and still getting the ball controlled on them.
Yeah, and I think this, for me, if I was going to look at this game, yes, surprising week one, nuked a lot of people's survivor pools. Like, there had to be a lot of lives ruined because of that pick yesterday. But ultimately for the Bengals, you mentioned it, Dad, we've unfortunately become conditioned to them treating this first quarter of the season the way a lot of teams do, as an extension of the preseason. And I trust the Bengals' parts on offense to get this worked out. Jamar Chase, we know, was also dealing with an illness that, listen, with everything that comes out around him, we're all kind of wondering how much of this is real, how much of this is the contract stuff as they continue to play the game. But he was out there on the field. He ended up with 6 catches for 62 yards in this game. Couldn't get in the end zone. They're going to get that worked out with the new parts there, but I'm with you. The defense is the part that's going to be concerning. This, to me, is just more like, hey, cool moment for Gerard Mayo. He got the bath at the end of the game. I almost said the Mayo bath, which it was, pun fully intended. Shout out to the homies at Duke's for a great weekend. But you know, he gets a big moment there for this Patriots team that, Dad, I thought was going to have Drake May pressed into action early on there. Yeah. Jacoby Brissett took a shot in the second half of that game, looked like he was getting up pretty gingerly, and I thought the Drake May era was going to get started a little sooner, but at least for them, Dad, it does have to be encouraging if and when you've got to put Drake May in over the course of this season. That rushing attack still seems like something you could rely on, and went out against live bullets and proved that. Yeah, I mean, we thought they were going to be one of the worst teams, though. Carolina firmly grabbing that in week one as the worst team in the NFL, with the Giants not too far behind. But yeah, they got that running game going. And speaking of the Giants, another surprise to me, even though it was the Giants and they're not a very good team, was Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was 19 to 24, 208 yards, completed his first 12 passes and had a couple of touchdown passes. That was, even though, again, it was against the Giants, who aren't a very good team, Darnold kind of taking advantage of his opportunity. That's another one. My Kevin O'Connell as head coach of the year award prediction preseason feels pretty good if that's the kind of performance we're going to get. Now, as you said, it's against the Giants who, buddy, listen, I have people I care about that root for the Giants, and I want what's best for them. I don't take great pride in this, but them and the Panthers clearly looked like the two worst teams in the NFL. And if you look ahead to the rest of the season, November 10th, we are sending those teams to Germany. Dad, a Panthers team that in year 2 looks like Bryce Young just may never really get off the ground, and this Giants team and Daniel Jones struggling to protect him yesterday against that Brian Flores defense. Sending that product to Germany on November 10th, it reeks of all brutal. Of the same cliches we've had about our overseas game for a while, that we are just sending them bottom of the barrel product and still somehow growing the game.
Absolutely brutal. But it really goes back to the Hard Knocks offseason with the Giants when they were flirting with getting a new quarterback because they were kind of, come see, come saw, and Daniel Jones. Now, again, as you mentioned, he was under siege. He was sacked 5 times. And when you're sacked 5 times, that means you're hit about 3 times as many times. But he's 22 of 42, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And the blame a lot will go on him because he's the quarterback, but there's nothing around him. And it's, this is, should they have stayed with him? Should they have gone for another quarterback because they paid him? I think, again, it's only 1 week and it doesn't have a great team around them, but you're starting to put some of the writing in pen, not pencil.
You're seeing some of the issues that were going to come, even with Malik Neighbors, who ended up with, averaging over 13 yards of reception in this game, 5 for 66, and made some plays that looked like juice plays. Yeah. But, Dad, to get the ball downfield, you've got to be able to hold the ball in the pocket long enough to get the ball downfield, and that's just not something that seems to be in the cards right now. And it would be nice if maybe you could hand the ball off consistently to somebody that could be the foundation of your offense. And instead, Dad, adding insult to injury, you mentioned the offseason Hard Knocks. We saw all those conversations around Saquon Barkley, and Saquon goes out and has the night that he had for Philadelphia on Friday in Sao Paulo in Brazil, while the Giants go out and fail to record an offensive touchdown. Like, that's the thing you couldn't afford this weekend if you were the Giants, among other things. And I'm not saying you're going to play this with that in mind, but man, optically for the Maras sitting at home and this organization's decision making to go out here and look this inept offensively, albeit against a defense that's going to stress people, while the guy you let walk out the door that during the season when you had your best year, when your new head coach comes over and takes you guys to the playoffs, it's on the back largely of Saquon Barkley, and now he's balling out looking exactly how we thought he would behind that Eagles offensive line.
Yeah, and not for a lot of difference in money. I mean, the running back position, as we know, is going to hit you the least from a cap hit, even the highest paid running backs. And you were looking at 12, 13 million, 10, 11, 12, 13 million for Saquon. So, yeah, that had to be a tough look there. That really did. And
Dad, I'm not even saying that Saquon would have done the same things for them, because we saw this team wouldn't be capable of providing that. And that's the point. It's a them problem. It's not a him problem when it comes to what's gone on there, I think, by and large. And you're seeing it yet again with Daniel Jones. While, yes, some of this might be he was drafted higher than most people expected by a GM that no longer works there in Dave Gettleman, this has also been, hey, they've failed to do what most other teams try and do with their young quarterbacks, is put a coherent enough group around them to be able to find out what you have, because it still feels like the box is checked incomplete for Daniel Jones.
And then quickly looking at Pittsburgh and Atlanta, does Justin Fields keep the job? I mean, he wasn't crazy in passing, 156 yards, but he ran over 4 yards a carry, and he didn't turn the ball over at all. And he gives you that extra oomph of being able to run as well. And again, it's a soft tissue injury. You know how I love talking about soft tissue injuries. Soft tissue injury for Russell Wilson. Is that going to keep him out? Or do they say, hey, just stay out and make sure while Justin Fields continues to play a quarterback? And it really helps when you have TJ Watt on the other side of the ball wreaking havoc.
I was just going to say, man, TJ Watt won this football game. Like, the Steelers offense barely had to do anything. When TJ Watt, and in the stat sheet only shows up as, four tackles total, 2 TFLs. He had the triple crown on his sack, though, sack, strip, and fumble recovery on that play to give the ball back to the offense. But, Dad, he had a sack that was called back because he was offsides. He had a sack called back because one of his teammates had committed a penalty. Like, that man had an incredible game wire to wire. The defensive player of the year race, that's probably the best take coming out of week 1, is the race between him, Myles Garrett, and Micah Parsons for defensive player of the year once again is going to probably be one of the most exciting awards races in the whole NFL. So that's going to be exciting there. Coming up next, we'll get a little look at what we've got coming up in hour number 2 with Marshall Newhouse here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., and Mike Golic Sr. Hour 1 is in the books. So here's what you have to look forward to coming up in Hour 2. Marshall Newhouse, former offensive tackle, is going to join us to look ahead to Monday Night Football, Jets and 49ers. Can't wait for that one. And we're going to discuss an unfortunate injury in Brazil that's been on top of everybody's mind. Questions about that field and a head-scratching loss. We're going to get to all of that. Plus, nobody in the YouTube comments has commented on how I have a side part instead of a middle part. Very disappointing. So I'll make sure to ask the guys about that. All that and more coming up in Hour 2 of GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield here. And Mondays in the NFL season now, as week one is almost all the way in the books. We got the 49ers and Jets coming up on Monday Night Football. And that's a perfect segue into what will hopefully be part of our Mondays and your Mondays going forward. More the pregame power up here on DraftKings Network, 6 o'clock Eastern, Mondays and Thursdays during the week here on DKN. Our buddy Trey Wingo, who you saw with us in the kickoff in Kansas City, Emerson Latzia, who you've seen around here, Claudia Bellafato, who was in this show with us when Jesse was out on maternity leave, and our next guest, Marshall Newhouse, former NFL veteran offensive lineman, kind enough to join us here now on Monday morning. So, Marshall, congratulations. You and Tom Brady both getting ready to make your broadcasting debuts really in the same weekend on your new shows here. So, congratulations to two GOATs that were also former teammates. Got to be nice for you guys.
I appreciate it. It's been the same amount of fanfare. I mean, I feel like everyone knows that I'm about to be partnered up with a wonderful host in Trey Wingo, as Tom Brady is with Burkhardt. And I hope there's a little less scrutiny, but hey, I'm here for it.
Yeah,
it
may
is
not be trending like Tom is trending, huh?
Man, I've never seen so many people call someone mid who's the greatest of all time at his other job than I did yesterday.
You know, people very excited, as we said, to be able to mock Tom Brady for anything. And I have a feeling even that's not going to last all that long for them. So, Marshall, obviously have plenty of places we want to go with you to. We'll take a look ahead at Monday Night Football, as I know you guys are going to be previewing that one in a big-time game for this Jets team, hoping Aaron Rodgers can last to play 5. But I want to start first, you know, one of your former teams in the Green Bay Packers. We haven't talked much about this morning, the news that we got over the weekend, as Jordan Love goes down in their game against the Eagles in Sao Paulo in Brazil, sustains an injury that thankfully no tears to the ligaments there, not going to knock him out for the season, just a matter of weeks for that star quarterback. But in general, you see this game and this news for the Green Bay Packers. What do they need to do to keep this thing afloat for a season that a lot of people were expecting them to challenge the Lions in that division for?
Yeah, they've got to figure out a way to run the ball. So until he gets back from this torn MCL, they're going to be very limited. I mean, they signed Malik Willis from the Tennessee Titans, and they have other backup quarterbacks on the practice squad, but they're in a little bit of, get the water out of the boat any way you can mode, because you just don't want this thing to snowball. You don't want to get behind Detroit Lions team. Listen, there's also a surging, potentially Minnesota Vikings team led by Sam Darnold. This division is just not going to be a cakewalk. And so you want Jordan Love to be able to take his time, not feel pressured to rush back. I've torn my MCL multiple times. You thank the Lord that you've dodged a bullet, that you won't need surgery, but it takes a lot of time to get trust back and the stability in the knee, especially for a QB, the way he plants and throws and twists and really slings the ball. So they've got to get an offensive scheme in place for Malik Willis, if indeed he's the guy they want to start, to then go out and grind games. Because we've seen Malik Willis, I'm not sure he's the guy who's just going to go sling it around 45 times. You're going to have to start playing even more complementary football than you have before.
On a larger scale for these games that are played overseas, does there need to be more emphasis on the field conditions? Because that field was a mess. And I mean, you're talking about, just one false move and you could lose a guy for a year.
Yeah, that field didn't do anyone any favors. I don't think that's why Jordan Love got injured, but we saw from the first snap, guys were sliding around like they were on an ice rink. And, I've done a Tootsie slide myself. I've done a stanky leg or two, but on purpose, not necessarily on a field in Brazil. So, yeah, there's got to be some level of consistency, quality control, which I know that they do. We talked for months after the Chiefs Super Bowl against the Niners about the field, and a guy became a celebrity who's I forget his name now, who tends to the grass in the field. So it's definitely a level of importance. You've heard players who come from representatives of the Players Association talk about wanting grass fields and things all over the place. Yes, the field was bad, but that was not why Jordan Love got hurt. But they've got to figure out a way to be like, the players need to have some expectations of what this is going to be like, especially when I'm flying 10 hours in week 1. You've got to give me something.
Yeah, flying 10 hours to a place where you're told to not leave your hotel at all, telling your families not to come down there. It was a real mixed bag for this one for the NFL that I'm sure they're going to hear about plenty on the back end. But if we're talking about Fields issues, I thought it was interesting that Colts and Houston game, seeing all the guys slipping out there, the new turf at Lucas Oil for that one. Yet, Marshall, we got the full range of the Anthony Richardson experience, I think, in this game. Like, the passing numbers weren't super consistent, 9 of 19 for 212 and 2 touchdowns, but we saw him uncork a couple of those balls that very few people on planet Earth are capable of completing, mostly to Alec Pierce in this game. So what did you make of our first look at him in year 2 and what'll hopefully be his first full season as a starter?
Yeah, I think you saw just a glimpse of why people were salivating about him coming out of college, even only having started a number of in the teens games in his career, is because, yeah, he made some rough overthrows. The balls were sailing on him a little bit. He's got to, dial in his touch. But then he plants off his back foot and throws a dart across the middle for a touchdown, and then he scrambles for a touchdown because, oh, by the way, he's 260, on a good day. So, yeah, he's got all the things that you just fall in love with. And I just feel like he's in good hands with Shane Steichen. Like, they're just going to mold him. They're going to continue to refine his game because it's all there. And I feel like he also knows that he's the dude. It takes one thing to be a guy who's got all the intangibles, got all the skill set. But I think he understands, I can do this. It's a matter of time before it clicks. Watch out the rest of the league. Watch out the AFC South. I tweeted yesterday, the AFC South is about to be a can't miss conference. We talked about the 4 teams yesterday, but I mean, between Levis, he's going to be a roller coaster. CJ Stroud is coming into his own. And then the Colts as well. I mean, the Jags now with, Trevor Lawrence, we think is figuring it out. It's, again, I tweeted also week one, don't panic one way or the other. The AFC South's looking really delicious right now, but yeah, Anthony Richardson leaves so much out on the table still with his talent. I'm just excited to watch him grow.
Boy, you mentioned Will Levis. That's just ill-advised, trying to dump the ball for an interception, a pick six in a game where everybody was looking at Caleb Williams, the number 1 pick, and he did not play well at all as the Bears get a special team touchdown and a pick six. What surprised you to the good the most on Sunday?
What surprised me the most was there was a few guys who we had questions about at the QB position, and there are a few guys who answered the call, and other guys who they are who we thought they were. And I said this is just I love a redemption story. We all do. I think that's an American tale. I love guys who kind of beat the odds or come back from a not great start. But there's people, especially in football, who they just are who we thought they were. I'm concerned for Daniel Jones and the Giants. They have not only had to watch Saquon Barkley score 3 touchdowns for a division foe, then they went out there and just laid a stinker at home in week 1 in the rough looking throwback uniforms. I love throwbacks. I love mixing it up, but when you start incorporating skin tones into the pants, I just have an issue with it. The beiginess. But anyways, the Daniel Joneses of the world, the Kirk Cousins off an Achilles. We're not going to overreact, but I think there's a level of some guys who we thought they were. And then there's some guys who are like, all right, I'm excited to watch this potential redemption story go. And then there's, we're looking out for Aaron Rodgers tonight and things of that nature.
I think one that jumped off the page for me, Dad, in terms of surprises from this weekend, the passing attack looked a little bit disjointed at times for that Houston Texans team on the other side of the Indianapolis Colts. But Joe Mixon, you're already getting that bang for your buck that you were hoping for there, over 130 rushing yards in this game where Houston's rushing attack had to be the strength. And we know that was overwhelming weakness for that team last year. We said they needed to add that depth. And so, yeah, while the pass protection looked a little sus and CJ Stroud was under a little bit more duress than I would have liked to have seen, we've seen the ball go through the basket on that side of it things, Dad. So seeing the fact that that rushing attack showed up when, hey, they're presented with light boxes and they were able to take advantage of them, that's the difference for this team from last year to this year. And in a more competitive AFC South, I think seeing that should make Houston Texans fans feel very good.
Oh, without question. I mean, we keep wondering what other team may jump up from the AFC South, and it's still not a given that Houston is gonna just run away with that division. It'll be interesting. Again, it's week one, overreaction time.
No, 100%. All right, go ahead, Marshall. Sorry,
I stepped on you. I just wanted to also add, just on a league-wide basis, we saw week one last year. Over 60 touchdown passes thrown. Week one so far in the low 30s, like almost in half. And week one is already a feel-out week, but that is a drastic drop-off. And now, you've got young QBs, coaches trying to protect themselves a little bit and not airing it out. But that is a steep fall-off. I wonder if that picks up in week two.
It'll be interesting to see that as far as other league-wide trends. We also we know the new kickoff, the dynamic kickoff that's in play for week one now. In the first 15 games of this season, 63.5% of kickoffs have gone for touchbacks. That's a decline from last year where it was 73% of touchbacks, but I don't know if that's exactly what they had in mind. I wonder if they wanted even more in play than that. So will be interesting as the sample size increases, how that tends to look, but that's the early return so far for the dynamic kickoff. It's time to look ahead, though, to what we've got coming up on Monday Night Football here, and let's do it through the lens of Cash It or Trash It. Cash It or Trash It is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. Heading into tonight, Marshall, Christian McCaffrey had a 17-game touchdown streak at one point. So are you going to cash him or trash him to score a touchdown today? He's minus 170 for an anytime touchdown scorer. And better odds to be the first touchdown scorer, he'd be plus 360 for that on DraftKings Sportsbook. So how do you feel about CMC in the middle of this offense that got Brandon Ayuk back and looks like they're going to get rolling?
Yeah, I think you can cash him for one. He's coming off a calf injury. They've given him a plenty amount of rest, but this Jets defense is no joke. We'll see kind of how this 49ers offense kind of settles in with getting Trent Williams back, signing Brandon Ayuk. They've got their guys. They've got their pieces. This just feels like a no-excuse year, and part of being in a no-excuse year is you got to get CMC his touches, and I think he'll get enough to get in the end zone one time. But I think he's going to be on a little bit of a pitch count. Just to it's a long season. We're now at 17 games. He's a guy that you're going to lean on and rely on later in the year. But expect them to feed him a little bit early and give him at least some catches out of the backfield as well, which increases his odds for this touchdown.
I would agree. I would cash him on the touchdown and getting him in the passing game because he's such a mismatch in the passing game. But again, Mike, you know me and soft tissue injuries, and he's a guy that's got a lot of muscle on that body, but that calf, man, I mean, I worry about that early in the season and a lingering issue. So I do wonder if he'll be on a pitch count, but I do think he'll score a touchdown.
Marshall, what do you want to see from Rodgers tonight in this game as the Jets get him back? We know the story from last year. We know all the off-field stuff with him. This is a guy that you played with at one point in time. So what do the Jets need to do with Aaron Rodgers to allow him to have success early behind this new-look offensive line?
I think they should just not hold anything back. Brother, you're 40. It's time. There's nothing else. I don't care. Week one, you've got all these, games under your belt, all this experience. The Jets are primed. They've leveraged their entire team to make a run with you. It's time. I need Aaron Rodgers to make all the throws to Garrett Wilson, get him his touches. I need Breece Hall to get his touches. I love Tyron Smith. Aaron looked very comfortable in a lot of clips we saw behind Tyron Smith, protecting him. Obviously, that's going to be a task with Bosa and company. But there's nothing else I need to see other than it's go time. Clock's ticking. I say that with respect, having played with him and him leading us to a Super Bowl and many, many big wins. He's got it in him. We know that. Yes, an Achilles is an incredibly rough injury to come back from, but he made it clear that he's ready. He said he's 100%. All right, it's go time. Enough.
All right. All gas, no brakes for Aaron Rodgers tonight, heading into a matchup with the San Francisco 49ers, who everyone expects to be back in the Super Bowl picture. And all gas, no brakes. Again, 6 o'clock Eastern, pregame power-up, Marshall Newhouse. Check him out there. Marshall, we appreciate the time this morning, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, fellas.
All right, welcome back. Thanks to Marshall Newhouse for stopping by again. Pregame power up here on DraftKings Network at 6 o'clock Eastern. Get you all ready to go for what you got coming up in Monday Night Football. And Dad, like we mentioned there, it really is going to be all eyes on Aaron Rodgers and how this offense looks early, what they decide to go to. Because Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, when they've been healthy, they've put up numbers even with the rotating cast of subpar quarterbacks there. We heard all about the love fest during Hard Knocks last year with Aaron Rodgers. You got to just cut this thing loose now. Marshall's exactly right. There is zero time for them to hold back. Yep. But I will be curious, what's the protection plan look like? Because you pointed out Leonard Floyd, the guy who helped end Aaron Rodgers' season last year, now lives in the 49ers. And it's not to say that he's the harbinger of bad news that's going to come their way, but it's more a reminder that 49ers team already has Nick Bosa, is a great defense, and certainly has a chance to put them in a bind. So how they're going to address that, getting stress test against a good defense right out of the gate, is going to go a long way in creating whatever headlines we run with for the rest of the week, because getting the Jets on prime time after all this offseason, manna from heaven for us.
Well, and Marshall brought up the point of last year. There were 60-some touchdown passes in week one. Now there's 30-some. It's a shorter passing game. You're just looking for receivers to get yards after the catch. You do swing passes, you do hitches, you do those bubble screens, you do slants, you do curls in the middle of the field. And a lot of that has to do with just getting the ball out. A lot has to do with pressure on the quarterback. You're just not seeing as many chances downfield. And normally defenses are ahead of offenses, especially when you're not playing a lot of your starters in preseason. You still have a defense that are ahead of offenses when you start the season.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things I did hear Brady talk about that I thought was good in the booth was offensive lines, because of the limited amount of practice time in preseasons now, almost always behind coming into the start of the regular season. It's why when you've got a group that's as laden with guys that were there, veteran players like the Lions did last night in Sunday Night Football, it allows you to put your hand down on turbo late with those guys and grind it out to a win in a way that right now a lot of teams with either new parts up front or just guys that haven't had a lot of time together because you've had to reshuffle them, a la the Rams and all those injuries, are going to struggle. So for the Jets, how they overcome and microwave that early on, to your point, could lead to the ball getting out of Aaron's hands quicker. He's been a quarterback that's more conservative with the football, usually in his career, pretty turnover averse. So all those things going to be fascinating to watch for him, the oldest quarterback in the league. Dad, let's get to the new guys from this weekend, though. We had the 3 rookies make their starting debut this weekend, and Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix. And it was about what you would expect from rookie quarterbacks across the board. Caleb Williams, the only one that gets the win because the rest of his team bowed up and made plays against the Tennessee Titans. Bo Nix goes out there and throws the ball the most, 26 of 42 for 138 yards and 0 touchdowns. 2 interceptions in this game, and Jaden Daniels puts up the most gaudy numbers. So, Dad, let's start with Caleb Williams. That game probably the most exciting in terms of the back and forth. The Titans got out to an early lead before the Bears defense came out there and took advantage of Will Levis's mistakes. What did you make of the number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams and his performance?
I think everybody got ahead of their skis on him, talking about how good he looked. He looked good at times. No doubt about it, but he also had some missteps, which he's a rookie. It's going to happen. But I think the expectation just kept building and building because he made a couple of plays in preseason when there's such a difference of preseason to the regular season. And so I think the ceiling was set too high for him. And CJ Stroud has something to do with that. The way CJ played last year, you can say some rookie quarterbacks are going to stand out, and everybody thought, and I kept saying about the weapons they put around him, that's going to aid him. But he looked like a rookie quarterback. He looked like the game was a little bit fast for him. He looked shook out there. Of the 3 rookies, listen, way too much was put on Bo Nix. Way too much. And even Sean Payton said, we have got to be able to run the ball. We cannot have our rookie throwing the ball 42 times. I remember when Ben Roethlisberger was a rookie, they were at their best when he was throwing 18, 17, 18, 19, 20 times. You have a rookie throwing 42 times, that's a bad recipe. A bad recipe. Jaden Daniels looked the most comfortable, certainly running the ball, but in passing the ball as well. And Caleb, again, I think too much was put on him in his debut. I think it was just overstated too much for him.
Yeah, I think for him, it's going to be a challenge still, like getting the ball out on time consistently. And we talked about it's all new weapons there for how good we said, hey, all of these guys are. They're all guys that they haven't even figured out how to work with each other yet in the body of that offense. Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze's a rookie inserting into that room. DJ Moore is the only one that's actually been there, done that with this group. So that's always going to take time to gel. Thankfully, like we saw in this game, though, that defense has the ability to still keep them in games and give that offense a bit of a backstop. But, Dad, you mentioned CJ Stroud. I just went back to look and kind of see, like, what are we dealing with in terms of the specter of CJ Stroud? Did it look as good early as I remember it did late? And while they lost their first 2 games out of the gate last year, did the Houston Texans, Dad? Game 1 for CJ Stroud against the Baltimore Ravens, who ended up being pretty good. 28 of 44 for 242 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Followed up by against the Indianapolis Colts. Again, a loss, but 30 of 47, 384 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. The next game, 20 of 30 against the Jags for 280 and 2 touchdowns. He really was something different. And to your point, it's a disservice to all of these guys because what we saw this weekend, much more in line with what it should be for rookies making the jump to this level.
Yeah, and you mentioned those first 2 games, gaudy stats, but both losses because he threw over 40 times. You just can't ask your rookie quarterback to do that much. It's got to be more balanced. Now, Caleb Williams did have a nice throw to Keenan Allen in the front corner of the end zone that Keenan Allen dropped. So that should have been a touchdown pass. But for the most part, he again, too much was put on Bo Nix. I think Caleb looked the worst of the 3 quarterbacks that started, but you had special teams and defense and Will Levis that bailed him out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd probably say Bo Nix, that was a pretty rough outing there against the Seahawks defense that, listen, the other part of that too was as you're game planning for them and for the Titans, you're dealing with both defenses that have a new signal caller at the helm of that. For the Seahawks, everything was new for that team with Mike McDonald, and they were able to put the squeeze on him. I think that is the one thing, Dad, when you looked at either Tennessee here, those teams all took advantage of the fact that they were playing a rookie quarterback, and they used those elements of that scheme from the Mike McDonald coaching tree that involved those simulated pressures where you're showing and going and throwing bodies from all these different parts of the field and got after these guys in a way that made them uncomfortable enough. And that was one of the big differences with C.J. Stroud is he was at least well protected last year. Didn't have the run game, but the defense came online earlier than most expected under DeMeco Ryans, and then he was protected by Laramie Tunsil and an offensive line that banged up a little bit, but especially when they were healthy, was a group that kept him upright.
Yeah, and now you look at week 1 to week 2. What kind of improvement do you get with your rookie quarterbacks? Because that's what you're looking for. The Broncos play the Steelers, so, Bo Nix, welcome to TJ Watt. The Bears play the Texans, who are obviously good on both sides of the ball. So it's what do you do next? And the Commanders play the Giants, so Jaden Daniels could actually have himself a pretty good ball game. But you, just like year 1 to year 2, game 1 to game 2, game 3, you should see steady improvement.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels is the one that probably looked most like himself in this game of the three quarterbacks, given what he was able to do there. And that tracks right in line with what we've heard about him as a player, probably quietly. I mean, he was, the number 2 overall pick in the draft. It's not like anything was super quiet about it, but it was this guy that was a steady build during his time at LSU. And the things that we talk about for some of the quarterbacks we've lionized in the past where they've gone out and made steady improvements. Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia was a guy that steady improvement during his college career when he got to the Eagles and the pros. Certainly Josh Allen, the modern poster child for this kind of stuff. Jaden Daniels has displayed that aptitude, so I'm not going to act surprised that he went out and had that success. And now you mentioned against that Giants team, that's going to be the eye-opening one, especially with Daniel Jones in that offense, seemingly continuing the free fall from last year. So what would you have, Dad?
Yeah, I say Jaden Daniels just ran into that juggernaut named Baker Mayfield, who threw, Tampa Bay threw for 4 touchdowns. And wow, that offense, they were something else.
Yeah, I saw the renewed conversation. Mike Evans was absolutely a gold jacket.
Yes.
It's just going to be a matter of how soon, and that showed up yet again for a team that we constantly disrespected in the NFC South. That seems once again. Although, listen, again, you have to account for competition in both cases. But for the NFC South, so far for the Saints and the Buccaneers, those were 2 teams that got off to pretty good starts. Now, the Saints did it against the Panthers, but that was a team where we talked about the offense being something that was maybe more akin to paint drying, and Derek Carr was airing that thing out early. Alvin Kamara was incredibly productive. The defense obviously made life a living hell for Bryce Young, so that's a division that's going to be interesting. Marshall talked about how interesting the AFC South is going to be with good teams. The NFC South might just really have the 2 right now. The Falcons certainly had the toughest test in the first week.
Yeah, they did. Kirk Cousins, the vet, in that game playing against Justin Fields, 16-26, a touchdown, a couple of interceptions, did not look great in that offense where he has a bunch of weapons. That was surprising to me that Atlanta just put up 10 points.
I think just for me, less so because, again, newness all around it. He's coming back off injury. He hasn't worked with all those parts as much as he wanted to, I'm sure, this offseason. And TJ Watt was over there. It was a game-buster performance. I joked and said he won that game by himself, but he lived in that backfield and disrupted those guys in a way that's going to keep them in a lot of ball games while they sort out the quarterback position. Dad, one more big one from this weekend quarterback-wise, pay attention to. Josh Allen injured that off-throwing hand in their comeback win against the Arizona Cardinals, who got off to the hot start and kind of like we got used to under Cliff Kingsbury out there, sort of petered off late. That Buffalo team, I think, got their feet under him and was ready to go. And Josh Allen had to put on the cape, Dad, at the beginning of that game and at the beginning of the season in a way that we talked about when we had him on. Usually seems reserved for the end of the year. Him being a big force in the running game, all these things that they don't necessarily want to do, I think, if they don't have to at the beginning of the year. Josh Allen behind James Cook is the second leading rusher on this team, 9 carries, 39 yards. yards and 2 touchdowns down in the red zone. So for them, week 1, already that concern with Josh Allen and his durability, albeit with the off-throwing hand.
But not going to change, right? Again, I always go back to that second year. They tried to get him to not run as much. But if Buffalo is going to reach the goal they want to reach, he has got to take off and go airborne and do exactly what he did in that game, where he went airborne on one of his touchdowns, came down on his hand, and next thing you know, it's heavily wrapped. Luckily, it was his non-throwing hand. But he throws for 2, runs for 2. He is going to have to put the cape on. He is going to have to be Superman. Now, James Cook averaged, he ran the ball 19 times, averaged under 4 yards a carry, but definitely had a good amount of carries. But this is nothing new for Josh. It's not going to change. They can't change it, and you just have to hold your breath and live with the outcome.
Yeah, I think in general, though, the ground game looked good. And to me, the most encouraging sign is of the rookie wideouts around the NFL. Keon Coleman already leading the team in receptions and yards in this game. Right. 4 catches for 51 yards to lead the team. And they did the things that made him comfortable. Josh Allen is in that position now as a quarterback where earlier we talked about, hey, Stephon Diggs had to come over and help him out, give him an open place to go and put the football. Now he's saying, hey, I got a big body wide receiver who can make good contested catches. Let me give him opportunities, and he took advantage of those in the early going. So that combined with the way the defense rallied, Dad, I feel pretty good still about my Bills stock coming off week 1.
Yeah, I think the Bills played. I thought the Bills would be down. They played well. I thought the Cowboys would be down. They played well, though Cleveland has all kind of issues. But we did get our first kickoff return for a touchdown by the Cardinals in the new kickoff era. David Phipp, the special teams coordinator for Detroit, he had said before this game, it's not worth the risk. It's not worth the risk of having a return. He said, it's not punitive enough, the ball going to the 30-yard line. I think that we're still going to have a big amount of touchbacks, and they're going to have to tweak it again if they want more returns.
Yeah, I think in the old XFL rule, they brought it out to the 35, which starts to infringe on that a little bit.
Yes,
so
yes.
I think you're probably right. The NFL, we mentioned the kickoff return numbers there. Not probably in the place that they were looking for. But yeah, DJ Dallas, put him on the board and give him his place in history. But coming up next, if we're going to talk about being down bad, let's finally take our medicine for what happened to the Irish over the weekend. Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. All right, guys, we have let it linger for long enough. Let's take a listen to what Northern Illinois head coach Thomas Hammock had to say after his team pulled off a historic upset.
I'm so proud of our kids, the coaches, just everybody. They believed. They believed. And we came here and got it done.
You told your guys this week that you didn't need anyone to be a superhero or superhuman. They just needed to be their best. What kind of performances did you see out there?
They listened to what I said. I told them all week, we don't need luck. We just got to be our best. And they was their best today, and we was able to get it done.
Where's this emotion coming from for you?
You know, all these guys that have been with our program, been through the ups and downs, and they continue to fight. You know, it's like they my kids. I'm happy for the adversity to push through. But, you know, no matter the situation, I just couldn't be more proud. I'm sorry.
No need to be sorry. Boneyard wins is what you call it when you all beat a top 5 opponent, a power 5 opponent. There was 70,000 people in here that probably didn't believe. Why did you all believe?
We got a veteran team, a bunch of guys that have been through a lot of different things, and they work together. Like we still are in college football. I know it's a whole bunch of other things with the transfer portal and NIL. We still have a family, and they believe in that family and doing things the right way. And I couldn't be more proud of them.
Congrats, Coach. Go celebrate.
Thank you. Hey.
All right, tears of joy and then tears of sadness. Guys, how did this happen? What the heck?
Oh, it's got to be something in the walls around there, man. Like I want to be happy for Coach Hammock. Like that's an incredible moment for that team. The MAC as a conference had been 0-51 against top 5 opponents in the AP poll in that conference's modern history. So what they did there is historic, and it is something they'll remember for the rest of their lives. And it is something, Dad, that I am all too familiar with, unfortunately. This is the kind of loss that we did when I was there. This is something I can't be surprised by. I know exactly the feeling those guys are having in that locker room of exhaling against a helmet that's not one of the premier ones that lights you up on the schedule, and all of a sudden looking up in the fourth quarter, wondering how you've let it get to this point. Like, I laughed at the beginning of this game where Antario Brown, the running back there, caught an 83-yard touchdown reception off a play that looked like a video game glitch through Benjamin Morrison's arms, the best player on Notre Dame's team. And I'm like, oh man, what a funny note it would be if the longest touchdown this vaunted Notre Dame defense gives up is against Northern Illinois in a game that I was writing off. I'm getting ready to call my first college football game of the season out in Nevada. And I'm like, I don't even have to really pay attention to this game. And sure enough, this group comes in, and he was right, Dad, did not need luck. There was no gimmicks. There was no trick-tickum stuff to this.
No.
This was, they came in and played smash-mouth football and beat Notre Dame straight up.
They outplayed Notre Dame. They flat out outplayed them. And if Notre Dame is going to get to where they want to go, you can't give up games like this. There's losing to a Power 4 team, and then there's losing a game that by all rights you should win. You're 28.5-point favorites. And this happened a couple years ago against Marshall. You just can't lose these games. And this was a weekend where some of the higher ranked teams won close games. So this was just one for Notre Dame. Get out of it, get the win and move on, right? You had just as Marcus Freeman said, you had an unbelievable high last week, and then you go to a low, but just get out of it. And with about 8 minutes to go in the third quarter, Jeremiah Love has that 34-yard touchdown run where he hurdles the defender. Notre Dame goes up 14-13, and I'm thinking, as I was sitting at the game, watching the game going, okay, even if it's a 1-point win, maybe they tack on another field goal, another touchdown, just get out with the victory. Just get out with the victory. But credit Northern Illinois. I mean, they just kept fighting and fighting. Ontario Brown had 225 total yards and hurt his knee at the end. I felt horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible for him as he was helped off the field. It's just a shame because the kid had the game of his life. And then what did Notre Dame in? They had the ball and they're driving and and Riley Leonard throws a deep ball, of which he does not have a great completion percentage, came from Duke without a great completion percentage of air balls over 20 yards. This was a deep ball that was woefully underthrown, picked off at Notre Dame's 20, but run all the way back to midfield. So it gave Northern Illinois a short field, and Northern Illinois did a job against what is considered the best part of Notre Dame's team, Notre Dame's defense. They did a great job in the short passing game, the running game, getting first downs, burning the clock to where they kicked the field goal with 30-some seconds to go. So you give all the credit to Northern Illinois for coming into South Bend, and not a fluky win by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to leave Notre Dame scratching their head. It's going to lead Notre Dame wondering what if. Now listen, the long approach is Notre Dame could win out and still make the playoffs. But the way they played, I mean, nobody would think they would be able to win out. They have to improve so much in a lot of areas on that team.
Yeah, I don't want to hear anything about the playoff until you show me a better football team on the field right now, because they are not in a place to be worthy of that discussion at this point in time. They've got the schedule for it, all the things that we want to talk about, riding high, but handling success after that Texas A&M win proved to be too much for them. And Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff have to wear that. The veteran leadership, especially on that defense, has to wear that, because that group, I mean, looking back at that game, Dad, we knew the offense still had a ways to go, but the quarterback and the receivers weren't good enough in this game. Still looked like there's a disconnect there. Weren't a lot of guys open, and Riley Leonard didn't look comfortable. Surprisingly, I expected the way that game went, to where I felt like the lines of scrimmage got won by Northern Illinois. The Notre Dame offensive line that went into that Texas A&M game with only 6 career starts looked a lot better than I expected when I went back and rewatched that game on tape. I thought they gave them a chance to win. They weren't going to be the driving force for them to win like they've been in years past. But when you've got a group that green, having them go out there and keep it clean enough to give you a chance, I thought they checked the box there. The linebacker group, though, lost a lot of veteran talent from last year with J.D. Bertrand, one of their captains, Maris Leofau, getting guys replaced by that right now around Jack Kaiser. That group had a really, really rough outing. And so I think those 3 position groups in particular have a lot of soul searching and a lot of work they're going to have to do in the coming weeks if this season's going to turn around. I believe they've got the right parts there, the same way I believe before the season, but coming out and taking your eye off the ball, which again, like, I am saying this from a place of experience. We came in my freshman and sophomore year, lost to Syracuse on senior day, lost to UConn on senior day the next year, lost to Tulsa at home in South Bend in Brian Kelly's first season there. Like, I know what this feeling is like, and it sucks. But how quickly they turn it around is ultimately going to define this team, because there is still a lot out in front of these guys that they've got to figure out, Dad.
Howard Cross, the defensive tackle, said, listen, we're 2 games in. The season's not over, but they have their work cut out for them. They have made it an unbelievable uphill climb. 2 things that stood out. Northern Illinois won the turnover battle, 2-0. They didn't turn the ball over once, and they controlled the clock for almost 10 minutes more than Notre Dame had the ball. They ran the ball 45 times for 190 yards on what was supposed to be the best part of Notre Dame's team is their defense. Certainly the secondary, but against the run as well. So Northern Illinois, make no mistake, Northern Illinois won this game. This was not a fluke win. They went out, they went to South Bend, and they took care of their business.
According to Chris Felica over at Fox, since the start of the 2022 football season, so the first season that Marcus Freeman took over as the head coach, there have been 28 losses by a home favorite of at least 16 points in college football. Notre Dame has accounted for 3 of them in that time period. And that's the thing that changed at the end of the Brian Kelly era at Notre Dame. They weren't losing those games that they were supposed to win anymore. And now at the beginning of Marcus Freeman's era, going back to Marshall in that first season and looking forward to this now, these are the unfortunate black marks on the resume that are going to need to change for him as he's mounted and gotten all this recruiting in the right place, brought in these transfer quarterbacks, got the big win to start the season at Texas A&M. How they go about steadying the ship now is going to tell us a lot about everybody involved. All right, time for the finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, the third. 3 quick stories to send you into Monday Night Football. Hell yeah, we're so back. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. And check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, Xumo Play, and the DraftKingsNetwork.com. And if you miss us or our great guests, shout out to Marshall Newhouse, NFL veteran offensive tackle, co-host of the pregame Power Up on DraftKings Network, for stopping by. If you missed any of that, make sure you check it out wherever you get our show as a podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. Guys, let's start off this, that, and the third with this. We are obviously affiliated with DraftKings Sportsbook around here, and somebody went out and had themselves a weekend on the book. One user turned 10 cents into $13,000 as a first TD-laden parlay hit this weekend. Dad, it was over plus 13 million odds. The parlay was Travis Etienne as the first touchdown scorer for Jacksonville, Kyle Pitts as the first touchdown scorer for the Falcons, Tony Pollard as the first TD scorer for the Titans, Rashid Shaheed as the first TD scorer for the Saints, and Aaron Jones as the first touchdown scorer for the Minnesota Vikings, all paying that out. Unbelievable to go the first TD route. We talked about that as a potential bet tonight for Christian McCaffrey, which I'm surprised he didn't keep it rolling for that, Dad, and really get greedy on this.
I am amazed. I'm amazed this person hit the bet. I'm amazed they bet 10 cents.
Yeah.
That's what blows my mind. Mike, what would he have made? What would this person have made if they bet $1?
A lot more.
What? 130,000 bucks?
Right. What if he bet $10?
1.3 million?
Right. What if he bet $100? Boom.
Well, the $100 is easy. You'd have made over $13 million and he'd have been rich. So it's
good job,
but,
Mike.
I mean,
good job on your math.
Shout out to gambling for helping me learn math. I will say the most amazing one in the bunch on all of this. The bravery to predict the Kyle Pitts first touchdown, considering what Kyle Pitts dynasty owners have been through during that young man's career so far in Atlanta, and the up and down after a rookie season full of so much promise and 1,000 yards and all these great things there. The bravery to go out in this new world with Kirk Cousins operating that offense, and now Arthur Smith nowhere to be found, and pick Kyle Pitts to be the guy in the middle of that, had to be the part that he was sweating the most. So congratulations to dude for pulling that one off. Because my brother in Christ, there are a lot of people out there that would not have had that courage. Next time, just maybe throw $1 down there and allow my dad to do even more fun math. Jesse, let's get to that and talk about, you already brought up Jesse debuting a fantastic new hair part today because millennials are taking back our lives from Gen Z who have been bullying us online for quite some time now. And that includes taking advantage of the purchasing power that we have and forming menus to our own liking.
Yeah, millennials have peak buying power right now, so some pillars of our childhood are making their way into some random places. Like, for example, this drink menu at a bar or restaurant titled Drinkalodian, okay? And all of the names of the drinks are plays off of Nickelodeon shows. So you got Rum Rats, Pineapple Under the Tea, Keenan and Mezcal, Hey Arnold Palmer, Legends of the Shirley Temple, Ginny Neutron.
Wow.
Guys, I don't get, what's Rocco's Modern Rye? Which show is that?
Rocco's Modern Life was that show.
I don't remember that one.
I still have socks, by the way, as an adult man that are Rocco's Modern Life theme here. That being said, these are all-timers here. Hey Arnold Palmer has my sword and shield forever. Obviously, Hey Arnold was a pillar of my elementary school experience there. I will say I have been in a Mezcal phase, so the Keenan and Mezcal would probably be the place I go. Mezcal, Stoli Zero, orange liqueur, Aperol, lime, and honey. So you get that orange soda flavor that Keenan and Kel were obviously well known for here. Dad, of these drinks, I know you don't have any real familiarity with the show other than they were on when we were watching as kids, but which of these sticks out to you?
The names, I like the Hey Arnold Palmer and the Rum Rats as the two best. As far as the one I would drink, I'd probably drink the Pineapple Under the Tea. That's probably where I would go, though I would certainly try all of these. But the Hey Arnold Palmer and the Rum Rats are probably the two best for me. Again, I've watched you guys watch these shows, and you did a little faux pas slip there when you said you'd watch it during high school. I remember you coming home from high school football practice and watching some Hey Arnold.
I mean, the one that would have gotten watched was SpongeBob. Like, the amount of people my age and younger that like to smoke weed and watch SpongeBob is too many to count. So that show took on a different meaning over the years. Jesse, were you into any of these?
No, not really. I didn't. I'm sorry. I know. I am who I am.
Knew it.
Don't hate me.
I knew it.
I'm not. I wasn't.
Don't say you didn't watch TV when you were a kid.
I
don't
did
tell
watch
me.
TV. I just wasn't really like a cartoons person.
What did you watch? Soap operas?
Like, I don't know.
In middle school?
NPR?
Yeah, like daytime. I don't know. What were those shows about? Like getting people Maury, stay home from school.
I can't fault you for that one. As someone during 2 days in training camp in college, our entire team used to lay down in the locker room, put Maury Povich on every TV, and watch Paternity Test to get us through the sadness of being in training camp. So I can't fault you for that one. That's great programming.
You would just wait to the end to hear, Ben, you are not the father.
The crowd goes wild.
The shows where they'd bring out like 3 or 4 guys that didn't know each other before, but then were all bonded at the end by not being the father. She goes running back, and Maury's got to go and calm her down. It's just electric television, not the kind of stuff you would find on Nickelodeon, and thus not the kind of stuff you would find on this very tantalizing drink menu that I would like to check out at some point. But Jesse, let's finish this off the way I think we should. The final boss of all of this feels like a millennial creation come to life on TikTok in the birthday box.
Yeah, check out this thing. This guys trying to like change the birthday game. I don't know, but I think we have the video of it.
I've been alive for 34 years, and I've been an adult for 7 of those years. And I've never heard of an adult birthday box. So you telling me it's a place that sell adult boxes that with a bunch of food in it? That's all I want for my birthday. A box with a mini birthday cake, fries, hot wings, pasta, lasagna. Why y'all ain't tell me nothing about this? Cause clearly somebody been holding out on this. For my next birthday, I want an adult birthday box. Somebody tag their name and number.
Yeah, so basically, like, it's, I don't know, it's just like a personal birthday box extravaganza. It's like a Lunchable on crack. I don't know.
It is.
Isn't it? Isn't this like going out to dinner or door dashing food to you? I mean, and you're just calling it a birthday box?
Kind of.
I mean, seriously?
Because it's got like a birthday dessert in it, and I'm sure it's curated to your liking of, hey, what you'd like in this birthday box. I am starving, by the way. And just to let y'all know, my birthday's at the end of the month. I would absolutely sign up for one of these right here. I would need the dessert portion of this to be a little bit bigger, but the combinations I'm seeing here of hot wings, what looks like some sort of mac and cheese, maybe a lobster mac I'm seeing in here, and French fries. If you made that curly fries, lobster mac, hot wings, and then a bigger section of birthday cake, I promise you, I don't need anything else than that. I'm at the point in my life, I don't want gifts for my birthday. Socks and new underwear and the birthday box. That's all I want out of this existence.
You can go out to eat and get all those things.
Yeah, but it's like you want to enjoy it and be disgusting in the privacy of your own home.
Yeah, I want to be a feral little piggy at home, sitting there in front of my fan, watching whatever I have queued up, some anime on TV, shoveling this out of and it's in a box. Like, can't you appreciate the novelty of all of this goodness being in a box?
Yeah.
What was it like? Millennials think they're inventing the wheel here? They're delivering food to you.
Did your old ass have a birthday box?
Forever.
Did you have a single birthday that featured a birthday box?
I had food that maybe came in a box, or I was out at a restaurant eating it. It wasn't deemed a birthday box. Oh my God, we've created a birthday box. This is something brand new. Give me a break.
Don't be jealous you didn't think of it. And if you want us in your birthday box, download, subscribe, rate, review this podcast, and shove it in there. Thanks. We'll be back tomorrow. Love you.